Welcome to the Women's Hoop Show. We had a great week one of the show. If you didn't check it out, we covered all of WNBA free agency in the first episode. And then on Friday, we talked DT's retirement, Unrivaled, and Athletes Unlimited. It was so much fun. But on today's episode, I'm joined again by Autumn Johnson as we break down the incredible and unprecedented parity in this season of women's college basketball. We'll recap the conference tournaments, especially that USC and UCLA game, and check in on who's going to get that number one overall seed ranking. Who's going to be number one? That's what we're going to talk about. We have a great show for you today. Let's get into it. Autumn, so much has happened since we last saw each other. And that's just how it goes in March, right? They don't call it March Madness for nothing.
Exactly. Chaos, madness. I'm here for it all. I mean, it's the best time of the year. I love March, the competition, the fiery passion. Like, let's go.
And with us, we be working.
Yeah.
When it comes to March, this is also our busy time. So I am currently in Las Vegas at the WCC tournament doing sideline reporting. And I think my favorite part of just the tournament atmosphere, especially for a conference like the WCC, where it is very much win or go home. Like you have to win your conference tournament or your season is over. And a lot of these teams just have that pressure. They're seniors. They don't want it to end. They want one more Cinderella story to come out of these conference tournaments. So you just feel the tension and I don't want to say desperation, but just the desire.
Yeah.
And it just hits different. It's a different type of atmosphere than working a regular season game. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. You want that automatic bid. I mean, you want to keep dancing in March. That's what it's all for. That's what you put all the work into. And you want another game with your sisters at the end of the day. So you're working for the next woman next to you at the end of the day. You want to make sure that you are pushing your season as far as you can go and you know what you're capable of. And that's all what March is about. Finding what you have done all season long and really honing in on that and excelling at the highest capability and just going for your best every single day. So these teams, I have so much respect for everyone, what they put into it. And we just get good basketball as fans. Like we benefit from it all.
Oh, absolutely. And when you think about Champ Week, what I was on air and I don't even have my notes in front of me, but I wrote it down. It's over 400 games that are happening across ESPN platforms during Champ Week. Like that's how much basketball, men and women's, it's just hoop central this week. And that just makes it extra fun because one, we get to cover it, but also it's hard for me to watch all that basketball. I'm playing catch up as I'm working the sidelines.
Same.
But I know that you were at the Big Ten tournament and what a tournament that was. Just overview before we get into USC, UCLA and the champ game, kind of leading up to that. What were some moments, some games that stood out to you?
I think Iowa's run was really special. Like they weren't an 11 seed. And even Michigan making it to the semis. They were a 6 seed coming in, shaking things up. They faced USC. I think they just ran out of gas. But that parity was on full display. All season long, the Big Ten has been deep and dangerous. There's going to be about 12 teams that are going to get an opportunity to play in the NCAA tournament. And exactly, like all the double-digit seeds or whoever you were playing, it gave that sense of March every single game. So to me, that's what it all shook out to be is the parity. But essentially, we got to, the top 4 teams and Michigan being that underdog coming in. But Ohio State, UCLA was a fun watch as well. A lot of games came down to a single bucket. Like Iowa was ready to upset Ohio State and possibly face UCLA, but it came down to that one bucket at the end. Hannah Stolke got a clean look, didn't get it to go. The gym, the atmosphere was crazy. I think that was like that run, and Caitlin Clark was there. Like that run in general was insane. But I think that was for me the biggest thing is the parity, but then it came down to the top two teams in the Big Ten and the top two, no number three teams in the nation
Mhm.
going head to head against each other. Like the championship ran through LA, and we got a really good one. Third time's the charm for UCLA. It was fun to witness.
Let's talk about that game because I just love how USC and UCLA, there is so much history there and so many huge superstar names that come up when you think about those schools. But I just love the irony that USC, UCLA come into the Big Ten conference. They are in the same city, down the freeway from each other, and we have to see them play again
Right.
in the middle of America, even though they could have played in California down the street from each other. But all season long, this has been a rivalry on 10. Like, this
Mhm.
is just something different this season. UCLA goes undefeated for most of the season.
Mhm.
They come to USC's house, gives them their first loss. Then
Mhm.
USC goes to UCLA 8 days ago, not even, 2 weeks ago. They
Mhm.
win again. But then in my mind, I'm like, all right, 3 times? You have to play a team 3 times
Tough.
in 2 months is so tough, and it's so tough to beat a team 3 times. How did UCLA pull this out? How did they say, "No, we are not losing to the Trojans again?"
Well, first things first, after that game too, this team was disappointed. They were mad. They were pissed off, like simply
Mhm,
put. And they were very vocal about that. I think overall, as a competitor, you wanted that matchup. You wanted this to be exactly how it panned out, and they got it. In UCLA, I think when you look at both of those games, the common denominator was Juju Watkins, like the generational
absolutely.
talent she is. Game one,
Ye
Game one, she went crazy. It was 38 points, 11 rebounds, 8 blocks, 5 assists. I will remember that stat line for the rest of my life. Because what?
'Cause it's that crazy.
How do you almost drop
Ye
a 40-point triple double with 8 blocks? Like, what? Anyways, then she
Mm,
turns
mm,
around in
mm.
game two and hits another 30 piece. And that to me just speaks how special she is because she can go out and change the game at a dime. But I thought game two, it was more balanced. Like Kiki Area Finn and
Mhm,
her as that 1-2 punch. They are unstoppable together. And I love how they're shaking out to be one of the best college duos that we knew they were going to be. All right, so now we get to game three. It feels like a Final Four game. Like this is a team that is both teams are from LA, and everybody has packed the gym to see these two go at it. Like we are in
mhm.
Indiana, and it's still rocking. Like the atmosphere is crazy. And I think for me, everyone was looking at each other and they were like, who we don't even know who's going to come out on top. We're all asking like, who you got? Who
That's
you
what
got?
makes it fun.
And,
Yeah,
and
it was
everyone
a toss up.
yes, everyone was looking at each other like, I don't know, like maybe UCLA figures it out. And honestly, I thought it was going to go in USC's favor
Mhm,
off rip. Of course, Juju Watkins was their best offense. Like when she gets downhill, good luck. She has a buttery, smooth, silky game, and she finds seams with ease. It's tough, like that hesitation, that poise, that body control that she has. She tries to get to the free throw line. I think she got whatever she wanted to start off the game. But then
mhm.
Coach Corey Close, whatever she said in the locker room, like
That
the sense
second
of
half, it was a different team, a different
100%.
UCLA team. Just for context, USC at half were up by 10,
Yep.
right? They had a solid lead around that. They were double digits.
13. It was
And
like a 13-point deficit.
13.
Mhm.
Okay, 13. Juju's going off. Juju's parents are in the front row. Her dad is yelling, "They can't guard you." I saw the clips of everything going down. Like she's going off that much. And the thing is, UCLA knew that she was going to do that. And they schemed and planned and tried to put her in a box and one. And she still almost gets 30 points. Like, that's how good Juju is.
Yeah.
But to your point, Corey Close gets into her team at halftime, leans on the fact of how upset they were in the last loss.
Mhm.
And they come out in the third quarter. USC goes cold, ice cold.
Mhm.
What happens to UCLA? How do they get back into it?
I mean, defense. It was a new sense of urgency, and UCLA turned up its defense. Juju Watkins had 2 points in that third quarter. I mean, 17-9 overall in that quarter. And they exploded with 24 to start off. And that's something that we don't even see from UCLA because they're such a great defensive team. They dialed into that in that third quarter. And I even thought Lauren Betts came alive too. She only had 2 attempts in that first half. And then she didn't miss the rest of the way. Like, she called her number. She knew what was
Wow.
needed from her. And I remember one play specifically where the time clock was, or shot clock was running down. She had the ball at the elbow, no options because USC is locking down on defense. And she's like, you know what? Whatever. I'm gonna take it. Rips through, goes in for the lay, finishes. Like, she knew she had to call her number and step up for her team and knew that she was the number one option. And she played like that. Did not miss, had a flawless second half. So I thought defense and Lauren Betts coming alive was the difference maker. And even her presence alone at 6'7", they locked down the paint. Like I mentioned, like, they were finding easy seams and getting into the lanes. Lauren shut that down. They were able to congest the paint. I think it was like a 16-6 like differential for the paint. It's just 6
Wow.
points in the paint allowed in the second half. So it was all on defense. Like, when they say defense wins championships, rebounds was a questionable thing because I would say USC was getting those hustle plays. They were diving
Mhm.
on the ball. They were out rebounding them by a crazy margin. But then they were able to keep them one and done, and they were able to also keep USC on a scoring drought. So for me, it was the defense and Lauren Betts.
Defense. And
Mhm.
Lauren Betts, she finished with 17 points, 7 for 10, 3 for 3 from
Yep.
the free throw line. Juju, almost another 30 piece, 29 points, 9 for 28 though, and 9 for 10
Mhm.
from the free throw line. So I did watch that press conference afterwards where, USC was saying, yeah, the shots just weren't going in. Like, that's
Yeah.
just kind of what happens. And I also think the part of this with conference tournaments that a lot of people may miss and what makes it a very unique scenario is it turns into AAU. Like, you're playing
Yeah.
3 games in 3 days and you are so tired. It's not
Mhm.
like the regular season where you get a couple days in between. You're traveling, you're on a neutral court, you're playing back to back to back to back. And then you get to the championship game. It's the second half, and sometimes your legs can go under you or you catch a second wind like UCLA.
Yeah.
So that's just what makes it a very unique experience, right? Like, nothing else is like
Yeah.
this.
And both teams had to play 3 games in 3 days. Like, it was
Mm,
insane. The way they were able to come out and just dominate and remember that hurt that they had in game 2. The thing that sets it up even more is, like, we might see this again in the
I
Final
know.
4. Like, they're not
I don't know if
done.
my stress can take it, Otto. I don't know. Those games are so intense. There's too much hate there. Like, they do
I
not like
need it.
each other.
I need it. I live for it. I want it. Like, that to me, that they want it. I know USC wants it. And I think that just makes things even more spicier. Like, I don't think it would have been fun if USC got them 3 times in a row and here we are in the Final Four. Like, no, UCLA
Yeah.
was able to get their lick back. Now what? We are definitely, if things go chalk on their end in March, we're going to get it again for sure.
Okay. Fingers crossed. Let's just send a prayer up. Basketball gods,
Please,
we don't
basketball
ask
guys.
for much, but I want this. I want this on a Final Four, brightest lights, everybody watching. Like,
Yes.
I think we need it. I think these players are those type of players. Like these are big time performances from big time
Mhm.
players. And I mean, we're going to get them all tournament long. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Just the parity, how they could be upset. They could upset some people. Like it's going to get crazy. But I
Yeah.
hope that if it goes their way, that we get that matchup. All right. I love that insight. I'm sad that I missed it live, but I watched those highlights. Talking to you, I relived it. I felt like I was
Thank
there.
you. I tried to give that to
Of
you.
course. Of
You were
course.
basically on the sidelines. I got you.
I know. I know. One thing before we move on. So in the WCC tournament, on the men's side, there's a Cinderella story going with Pepperdine, number 9 seed, upsetting teams, huge
Uh-oh.
performances. They play again today. They're on their 4th game in 4 days.
Oh,
Just
wow.
insane stuff. So that's been fun to watch. But then on the women's side, San Francisco, Oregon State. Oregon State was up by 17.
Mm.
San Francisco comes back, ties it. Oregon State has the final possession. If they miss, we go into overtime. Kelsey Reese, who is a top player, all WCC, only has 2 points on the day so far, takes the last second shot, hits it at the buzzer. At the buzzer.
Stop.
And I said, it's March. Happy
It's
March.
March.
She finished with 6 points. Like she averages almost 20 and she hits the final bucket. She said, it may not be my night, but it could be my moment. And I was like, okay,
Woo!
Bar, you're the
Heard
best
you.
interview ever because that was a great
Yes.
quote. Thank you.
Wow.
So it's just fun. It's just fun. This is the best time. All right. I love it. Okay. Up next, my favorite segment, Hoop Roots. But first, let's pay some bills. Welcome back to the Women's Hoop Show. It's me and Autumn here. And it's time for Hoop Roots, which I love. And it's so fun. And it's college basketball themed today. Okay, you ready, Autumn?
Okay, let's do it.
So I saw that Stanford, with their early exit in the ACC tournament, will not punch their ticket to March Madness for the first time in 36 years.
Mm.
That is insane. Such an insane stat. And we're going to talk about the ACC tournament and that tough competition in a little bit. But Stanford is just kind of known for that. But that got me thinking about the early days of Stanford women's basketball, way before Tara Vanderveer came into the picture.
Yeah.
Did you know that the first intercollegiate women's basketball game was played on April 4th, 1896, when Stanford and Cal played in downtown San Francisco? So, women's hoops was founded at Smith College in the 1890s, but all the ladies playing went to Smith. So, this was the first game between two opposing schools. No men were allowed in the gym. It was 700 tickets sold only to women. And Stanford won 2-1, like 2 points to 1
Wait,
point.
what?
It was
Wait,
very,
what?
very low scoring in the 1800s. Okay. But they still got that dub. All right.
Okay,
And
that's all that matters.
that's all that matters. And the pep band played for them when they came back on campus. Like this was a really big deal. Everyone was so excited. But unfortunately, by 1899, Stanford banned women students from playing intercollegiate sports because they thought women were overexerting themselves. It was too much for the ladies. You shouldn't be sweating that much. We can't have you play sports. So it wouldn't
Oh my
be
gosh.
it was over a half a century would pass before Stanford would have an official team again. So they got
Crazy.
that dub. They were excited. That's why that Stanford and Cal rivalry is so deep. It goes back to way, way before Stanford basketball was what it was and what it is now. But yeah, huge shout out to my co-author, Emma Bachelari. She did her research on that topic. And you'll find more stories like this in our book coming out soon. But how fun is that?
I need the
2-1.
book. Jordan, I need the book because every single time we do this segment, I learn something new. And that's just crazy to even fathom. And like you're saying, 100 years later or whatever, here we are, like finally with the team. What? That's insane. That's insane to even
Insane.
think about.
Stanford basketball definitely, was at the tops of the tops, and now they are going into this new era of women's hoops there. Let's
Yes.
start with the ACC because I kind of want to do a round robin of all these tournaments of kind of what went down. But
Yeah.
Stanford losing in the ACC, but then when you think about the big behemoths that are in that conference,
Yes.
you have Notre Dame, you have Florida State, you have Duke, who ended up winning it
Mhm.
all. Just talk about kind of as we were playing catch up because we were on the ground. What kind of stood out to you? Because to me, it was the Dukies.
Yeah, 100% the Blue Devils for sure, defeating NC State, who I thought were going to take it all. But for Duke to knock off Notre Dame to get there too, that says
Yeah.
a lot because we all were trying to crown Notre Dame, rightfully so, the way they came out. I mean, they won about 19 straight, but then they've been up and down to close out the season. So I think this time is very necessary for them to kind of regroup and get back on track. But Duke wanted it more. That's what I saw. Like that, again, that sense of urgency that we were talking about for UCLA. NC State came out hot the first half. Isaiah James, she was going crazy. She had 18 points in that first half. Went down with like, we don't know if it was a hip injury, but we'll say like
Mhm,
lower leg extremity or something in
mhm,
that
mhm.
manner. But I thought the game shifted at that point and they weren't able to shake back from it. But they came and took it from NC State. It was their defense and it was their balance and the way they were able to out rebound them. Like everything, they checked off all the boxes. In NC State, they just fell flat in the second half. It was very out of the norm for them. Who they're like a fast pace, like shifty. The guard play is insane. They just couldn't shake back from it.
Mhm. And another time that Duke was down big. Like it seemed like NC
Hmm.
State was running away with it and then turned it completely around, 180. And Duke ended up winning 76-62.
Yeah.
James on Duke, 18 points. Okonwa, 22 points,
Woo!
8 for
Off the
3.
bench.
Went off. And this is what I
Yes.
love because when Notre Dame and Duke matched up in the regular season, I got snacks ready on the couch. Like I was ready for that game. And then Notre Dame just blew them out the water. And I was like, dang
Yeah.
it, that was kind of disappointing. And
Yeah.
that's why conference tournaments are a different season. Then when we go to the NCAA tournament, that's a different season. So
Hmm.
a different Duke showed up. And one quick thing, this is the Kara era. And this was the first time Duke won a conference championship in 12 years. And it
Mm.
feels like this is just kind of a breath of fresh air in this
Yeah.
Duke Blue Devil team. So I'm excited to see how that translates when we get to the NCAA tournament. Now going to the SEC, because this conference, it came down to a coin flip to see who that number one seed was. Never seen that in my
Ever.
31 years of life.
Ever.
I don't think we'll see it again. That was wild.
Please.
South Carolina wins the number one seed and they end up winning the tournament. They have to go against Texas, who is the number one overall in women's college basketball. Big, big games from a little bit of every. Chloe Kitts, 15 points. Jones at Texas inside, 14 points for her, 6 for 6 from the free throw line. How did South Carolina do this? Like I think they were just mad that they didn't get the overall seed outright, right? Like that had to
Right.
be their moment, their motivation.
100%. I mean, please let's never do that again. Point differential, something, anything other than a coin flip. But it ultimately came down to the top two teams in the SEC to
Mhm.
duke it out. And here, South Carolina is third straight SEC title. And I think they do it how they always do it, with their defense and their depth every single time.
Mhm. Mhm.
You look at the first half, I mean, South Carolina was able to shut down Texas with just 16 points. And this is a team in Texas that loves to get to the rim. They rarely shoot threes. When they do, cool, but like they're trying to get to the rim. And they dismantled them. Like they could not find a bucket. They were suffocating. They were swarming. They were flying around. They move on a string. And everybody, like if you play on Dawn Staley's team, you're rebounding and you're playing defense at an all-time high. And I thought everyone played into that, but that just speaks to what Dawn is building there. And I know everyone wants to talk about the 10 All-Americans, and I love her clap back with the ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I was like, yes,
The
that was
pettiness.
the ultimate
Yeah.
clap back. But
Yes, that was
I,
fun.
when you have the number one like bench production coming off the bench and Joyce Edwards, Mylasia Fulwiley, Tessa Johnson, that's hard when you have that rotation constantly coming in and them continuously finding buckets and finding each other for buckets. I think this is going to be a new rivalry in the SEC thanks to conference realignment, and I'm so here for it. But
Mm.
I know these two might see each other again too because of how things are going to shake out with the one seeds. Like they're both locked for one seeds too. So if things go chalk, we could probably see them face off as well. It's another UCLA USC situation.
Essentially, all these conference championships feel like little previews for what could happen in later down the line, which I feel
Yes.
like is super rare because that just shows how great all these teams are. But you talked about the clapback. I was secretly wanting Kentucky and South Carolina to go at it in the championship just because I knew that was going to be a storyline. And I feel
Yes.
like Dawn would have wore like a McDonald's shirt, a Gucci McDonald's
Monster and
crossover,
Gucci. Oh my gosh.
something
That's
that just would have
hilarious.
went crazy. But we didn't get that. It's okay. South Carolina wins 64-45 over Texas. Very emphatic win there in the SEC.
Yeah.
Lastly, let's talk about the Big 12
Mhm.
because I don't think, like me personally, and my timeline isn't talking about TCU enough
Mhm.
and what Haley Van Lith and what I call TCU as the Pac 12 All Star team, because that's essentially all of those transfers from the Pac
Yes.
12 went to
That's
TCU,
good. That's
right?
facts. Yeah, yeah.
It totally is. The coach used to coach at Oregon, and
Mhm.
he brought every best player that he played against in that conference to TCU. And they have been electric. They have
Yeah.
been, I don't even know if it's quiet, but again, on my timeline, just climbing the
It's
ranks,
quiet.
beating really good teams. And Haley Van Lith erupts for 20 points. I mean, how did this Baylor team is not, I don't know, some rando team on the street. Like this is a really good Baylor team as well. But TCU is still able to pull it out, Autumn.
Yeah, Haley Vinlith. I just want to get this out the way first. Like, super proud of her bounce back, like her comeback. She
Mm-hmm.
didn't let that last year define her whatsoever. Her chapter at LSU, like she knew who she was as a player, as a person, and to see her thrive in this new situation, whereas it's been all about fit, and she's been the perfect
Yeah.
fit alongside of Sedona Prince, alongside of Madison Connor, like this big three that's holding it down has been able to connect together and have chemistry, and that's shining through. We've seen that. Just what they can do inside and out, having that balanced attack has been really cool to witness. Like they're essentially going to be a 2 seed possibly in the NCAA tournament. And this is a group that just last year they were asking people to try out.
Yeah.
Like, and
Wow.
they couldn't compete in a lot of their games because they didn't have numbers. And now you form this squad who could potentially shake up some things in March. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
scary and it's pretty quiet. I'm gonna echo that. It's been quiet. And I think they're gonna start waking people up. And I think it's gonna be on the back of that big three and Haley Van Lith. coming into her own and ending her chapter, her collegiate chapter, with a bang.
Yeah, absolutely. And, this TCU team last year finished ninth, I believe, in conference. The year
Mhm.
before that, they were 1-17 in conference. Like, this is a complete overhaul, complete new team, new coach, new energy going through this TCU team.
Yep.
And, it was, I believe on game day, Chinea Gumuke, she said, the praise has to be as loud as the negativity was for
Yeah.
Haley Van Lith, because
Yeah.
she's going to get back on this stage. And how cool is it going to be for her to rewrite her story? And like you said,
Mhm.
end her college career on a high note.
Mhm.
They might not go all the way because there's some big teams ahead of them, but
Yeah.
it's going to be a very different conversation around Van Lith than it was last year, because the
Yeah.
criticism was very loud, very, very loud. So good for her. I'm
Yeah.
so happy for this team. And TCU beat Baylor 64-59. Vonleh, 20 points. She's just a monster inside. Another,
Great
she was at
fit.
Colorado last year. Great fit for Baylor. I think that
Mhm.
balances out their guard play so well, because I think Baylor has some really, really quick, gritty guards. And then you just
Mhm.
have this powerhouse Aaronette Vonleh inside. So she was 8 for 18, though, because she was going up against
Sedona.
6'7" Sedona Prince. So
Yeah.
that's not an easy night at the
Yeah.
office. But I'm going to be watching both of those teams. I think they are going to shake some things up in March Madness. All right. Last one, we got to talk about UConn. They
Mm.
were Big East. It was in Connecticut. Um, they win pretty handedly. Uh, and that's pretty typical for a UConn conference tournament. Not too much resistance there. But I
Yeah.
will say it was nice to see a photo of Kurt Miller and his head coach and Maddie Segrist. They were there. They pulled
I
up.
saw that.
Right? They were looking up at their future number one pick.
Mhm.
Maybe, potentially, we all know. I mean,
Possibly. Yeah, yeah,
going up
yeah.
to the conference tournament, I don't think was more obvious. Like, I don't think you could get more
100%.
obvious than that.
With
So
the
I think
Dallas
we know.
Wings logo, pullover,
Yeah.
all the things. I'm like, okay, number one pick, Paige Beckers.
All
Got
right. All right.
it.
I think we know. But
Yeah.
UConn, they took care of business. 18-0 in conference. I'm always excited to see UConn come tournament time, because their conference doesn't give them that much resistance. It's not like the other conferences like we just talked about.
Mhm.
So they have to kind of I don't know, they just go into a 2.0 version of themselves come March
Yeah.
Madness, and they're able to just switch it on, right?
Well, we just saw that South Carolina game. They handled them by 29 points, and South Carolina looked completely dismantled.
Yeah.
So I know they go up in the Big East and they're able to blow out their competition, but I think that was a statement overall that, like, we're
Mhm.
getting multiple contributions around Paige Beckers at this point of the season. And this is where we're at. This is what we need to bottle up and take into March. And they're poised around that. And you have Paige Beckers at the end of the day. And she also is trying to go out with a bang and restore that legacy, that championship mentality that UConn is known for. And, South Carolina has reigned supreme for these past few years. She's trying to put UConn back into that conversation. They've been there, they've gotten to the Final Four on the back of Paige Beckers and also championship games. But it's been a drought since that 11, they have 11 titles there. Like, that is the norm with the Huskies. I think it's not a clear-cut champion at the end of the day, and UConn's trying to be a part of that conversation. Everyone has beaten everyone, so it's hard to say, but they have a really good shot, especially how everyone has come along. They're not just relying on Paige Beckers. They got AZ Fudd back too.
Mhm.
It could be something really special down the stretch, and we'll see how it shakes out. But I like it.
We'll see how it shakes out. Okay, I want to talk about that parody, but first, let's take a quick break. Welcome back to the Women's Hoop Show. And we were just talking about UConn and the parity and how South Carolina has reigned supreme recently. Hasn't always been that way. Maybe if you're a new women's hoops fan, you're like, yeah, it's South Carolina, right? No, it has always been UConn and Tennessee going
Mhm.
back and forth. And there was kind of, honestly, the women's college tournament wasn't as exciting because it was like, okay, well, it's going to be UConn or Tennessee at the end. Now, that is yesteryear's storylines. Now we have no idea who it's going to be. Autumn, both you and I have to make brackets. We have to fill it out for our jobs and just for fun.
Mhm.
And it is going to be so hard because there are some really good teams, and not all of the great players in the country are on one team. They are spread out around the country. They're all playing good basketball right now. But you were telling me a little bit before we started today that there is this conversation around who's going to be the number one seed because
Yeah.
Texas lost, Notre Dame lost, USC lost. So, how does all that come into play before we get to tournament time?
Yeah, everyone was looking at either the Big Ten or SEC tournament because these are our one seeds. The gap from the one line and the two line is pretty drastic.
Mhm.
Texas, South Carolina, UCLA, USC, they are all locks for one seeds. Now, the conversation is with all the shakeup, Texas should have been the number one overall seed if they won. They didn't. And
Mm.
if USC would have won, they would have jumped into that spot. They didn't. So things get complicated. It gets tricky. In my mind, what the selection committee goes off of is recency and head to head. And I'm
Mm.
looking at head to head more than anything as far as like their components that they base it off of. So USC, in my opinion, still should be the number one overall seed because they have the
Mm.
2-1 head to head over UCLA. And they also look at competitive losses. Like it wasn't a blowout, it was single digits falling in that
Yeah.
championship game. So they beat them twice, just fell short by this much because
Mhm.
of that
Mhm.
third quarter, that second half, So for me, it would be USC, UCLA, who has the head to head over South Carolina, beat them by 15 points in November. But and then Texas at the end, of course, falling,
Mhm.
lost by 19 points. But I wonder also, another little loophole is like maybe they look at the entire body of work in South Carolina with about 15 or 16 quad one wins, they would jump into the number one
Yeah.
overall seed. But they were just at the two line. But there's a big conversation right now that South Carolina could possibly jump there. They're saying it should be UCLA because they just won the Big Ten championship and they've been the number one team in the country for 12 weeks. So I'm
Autumn, I'm
very
stressed.
interested to see how the selection committee is going to look at this because there's different components
Wow.
that they look at. For me, I think head to head would come more into play, but also recency. Like as people were like, okay, they just won the championship. Like this is what we see in this glimpse of moment. Are they going to rely on that more, or will they look at everything as a whole? Which I know they are, but like how
Mhm.
what's going to pull more than the other is what I don't know. We'll see.
Oof.
I don't know.
Well, I, for one, am so excited I'm not on that selection committee because
Stress.
that is a very hard job, very
Yeah.
stressful. I bet they were watching those games like, come on, Texas.
Like
Like, let's get this done. Come on, USC. Like, this would just make our lives so
so much
easy.
easier.
And nothing comes easy in this month. So they knew what was up. But wow, that
Yeah.
really shook some things up. And, typically that doesn't happen, right? Like it's not
Mm-mm.
coming down to the wire this close. Have you seen something like this since you've been at the helm of bracketology?
Never. That's why I'm stressed.
Wow.
Like, never. I've been doing this for 5 years, so it's not that long, but like in my 5 years, never.
Oh my
But
goodness.
it
That is
matters. Like, placement matters because it determines the strength of your region and your path to the Final Four. You want that number
Mhm.
one overall seed. You don't want to be the
Mhm.
last seed. And just even being the 2 seed, like the second 1 seed is a major impact as well. So I know all teams are talking about it. I've heard like the coaches talk about the 1 line, the 2 line. We'll see how it goes, but I know for sure they will be 1 seeds. It's just a matter of like how you're going to be placed and the
Where
strength
yeah.
of your region.
Because that's what matters.
Mhm.
Especially I think about last year, I feel like the 1s and 2s were ironed out, but it was the placement. And it
Yeah,
was a lot of conversation around, okay, South Carolina kind of has a tough road, or like Iowa has a really tough road.
Iowa.
Iowa, right? It was like,
Yeah,
okay, we want them to be in the finals, but
yeah.
why did we give them such a hard road to get there? So it's about where you're placed, who else is in your region. It's a lot of other factors that go into it rather than just, okay, we're going to have a number one next to your
Mhm.
school name.
Yeah, Iowa was just in this second region right after South Carolina, and they had Colorado, they had LSU, they had UCLA, they had West Virginia. A lot of rematches that they've seen, but like that gauntlet overall,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it matters. Placement
Woo!
definitely matters.
Our producer Greg just popped in the chat. He said UConn and South Carolina are tied as being favorites to win the Natty.
You know what?
Tied? That's not helping my stress, Greg.
I'm
What in
not
the
mad at it.
world?
I'm not mad at it. I'm not mad
Tied?
at it. Tide is crazy. But
That means,
you
oh,
remember last episode we did when I said I would never bet against Asia Wilson? I would
mm-hmm.
never bet against Dawn Staley ever.
Facts.
Because one thing she's going to do is get her team to a Final Four and no in game adjustments in the championship game. And they have consistently done it. And she has a group who has been there and they know how to get the job done. So I'm not mad at that. With all this chaos going on, I know they had a 29-point loss to UConn. I know they had some shakeup versus Texas, but these players have been there.
A rematch of UConn and South Carolina in the championship. I'm going to play devil's advocate too. I mean, I'm also not going to bet against Dawn Staley, but for the show, UConn, the way they went out last year has
Yeah.
been at the top of their mind this whole season. And to your point, when we talked about earlier, what they did against that South Carolina team just made everybody say, whoa. Like everybody
Mhm.
just sat back and was like, oh, okay, UConn. Like we didn't know y'all was coming like that, especially at this point of the year.
Yeah.
AZ Fudd looks unstoppable. And I think it just makes
Yes.
you dream a little bit about, wow, if this team was healthy for 4 years, like with Paige at the helm, what could have happened? And then you bring in Sarah Strong, who is out
Mm.
of this world. So they have all the pieces, and you have Gino Auriemma, who has been
Mhm.
there so many times. He knows what it takes. Tide is wild.
Tide is
We're recording this
insane.
on March 10th. I what did we last pray for the basketball gods? Okay, we want USC, UCLA. I
Yes.
also want basketball gods. Can we get UConn and South Carolina somewhere, maybe in the championship game?
I
I
was
would
gonna say,
love
is
to
this
see
our
that.
final four teams? Is this who we're sending?
Maybe.
Did we
That's
just
a
pick our
good
final four?
Final Four, Autumn. That
That's
is a
good. I need it.
amazing Final Four.
I'm here for it. Popcorn.
Oh, all
Popcorn games
right.
right there.
Okay, before we get too ahead of ourselves, because we don't even the selection committee don't even know what they about to do
Right.
yet.
We don't know
We already
nothing.
picking the final four. We don't know anything yet. So we're gonna get out of here. But what a fun week of hoops and college basketball. Feels like we are right in the heart of it, right in the thick of it. And Autumn, thanks for being here to break it all down. Can't wait to do this more throughout this month. It's gonna be so fun. The Women's Hoop Show is an Odyssey original podcast hosted by me, Jordan Robinson. Today, our co-host was Autumn Johnson. Our producer is Phil Sweetek. Our video team is led by Kirk Courtney and includes Tal Ben Abraham, Evan Cox, and Lauren Vieira. Our executive producers are Greg Holtzman, Asha Saluja, Danny Freisinger, Maddie Sprunkaiser, and Leah Reese-Dennis. And special thanks to Moira Curran and Josephina Francis.